Welcome back. W programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank. A relentless commitment to be the best at everything they do. Branches now throughout the Baltimore area. And, of course, Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, and getting it to you, that Rofo coffee in the mornings. Make sure you're using the app and downloading that. If you use that when you gas up, you get some free fried chicken and Western fries. I keep talking about the Western fries, and I haven't had the Western fries. One thing I keep talking about doing, and I don't do, is bothering John Ourand, mainly because everyone mispronounces his last name, including me, and I'm sure I will before the end of this. But he's one of my favorite dudes to follow out on Twitter, at Ourand. That's OURAND_SBJ. And most of you know that I own a sports business, run a sports business, have always been involved in a sports business, and he writes about sports business. He's also a long-suffering Orioles, Wizards, Caps guy like us. You're a Redskin guy, though, John, right? I mean, so I can write you off the ship at that point, right?
You know, I'm one of the few people, I go between both. I don't love the Ravens, but I don't mind. When they won the Super Bowl, I was happy. Let's put it that way.
Well, what's your background in being a Baltimore sports fan, in addition to being a guy with tens of thousands of followers that writes great stories like your ESPN NFL thing that we'll talk about in a minute? But I don't even know your background. Like, why are you an Orioles fan, as an example?
Look, man, I grew up in D.C., and I'm a big baseball fan. And growing up, we didn't have a team, and it was the Orioles, and it was owned by a D.C. lawyer. And you know, I had a shirt when I was a kid that had Washington's favorite birds, and there was a big Oriole on the front.
You got a picture of you in that shirt somewhere? You should share that on Twitter.
I'll
retweet that. You get a free retweet from me on that, John.
And so, as soon as we got the Nets, and I was so frustrated because we'd been going through so many losing seasons, and I was ready to switch to go to my hometown team, of course, right? But every time the Nats played the Orioles, it's like that Seinfeld joke about the laundry. It's like you see the black and orange, and you see Adam Jones, and in my mind, it's like Eddie Murray, almost. I mean, there's such a history.
Every time Strasburg tries to pull me out, Brooks sucks me back in, right? Just like that.
Brooks and Manny Machado, absolutely.
Manny, who? That youngster just signed that big deal with the Yankees. That's a year from now. That's the conversation we're going to be having, right?
Hey, I'm going to enjoy it for the next couple of months.
Man, you're a sucker. I mean, for as smart as you are about sports business, you are a complete mark. I mean, you really are.
I'm not even going to argue with that. I'm just going to, as long as he's wearing the laundry, I'm going to root for him and enjoy watching.
And then go write all the dirt on the other side of this. Well, look, man, you wrote a piece this week, and I've lived it, right? I am the Putin journalist that was beheaded at high noon 13 years ago. Had my press pass taken away after 26 years of covering the Orioles because my coverage was not favorable to Mr. Angelos at that time. And I think we're starting to see in every market, as newspapers have shrunk, as radio has evaporated in many cases, certainly here in Baltimore, nobody over at the corporate, none of those numbnuts are going to be taking any shots at John Angelos or Peter Angelos. They're the flagship. They're not allowed to. Angelos has said that out loud on my airwaves. You're not allowed to criticize the team. You work for the team. That's his voice, and I play that all the time here, John, 21 years later. But this ESPN NFL thing, when the big dog, the Putin comes in and puts the foot down and says, you will not talk about CTE, you will not air this, you will not criticize our owners, you will not criticize our quarterbacks, you will not criticize our referees. I don't know where you draw the line if you're ESPN. Because the business is we have to be in the business with the NFL, and the NFL clearly has no problem editing its content at this point and has its own machine. This is quite a story you've unearthed, and I think anyone who thinks about sports and how it's presented should really, especially in the era of Donald Trump being president and Fox News being a propaganda network, that we should all be concerned about where is this going when you can plow ESPN over, because if you can plow them over, there ain't anybody else left, right?
Well, this is a problem that is unique to ESPN, because if you think about the other NFL TV partners, you have NBC, you have CBS, you have Fox. They don't really have news departments through their sports division. ESPN has a news. They don't only have a news department. They have Pulitzer Prize-winning reporters in there. Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham, they've been unearthing, and they continue to. So the NFL's been pushing back, and these guys are still going out there and doing stories that Robert Kraft hates, and he's an influential owner. And they're doing stories that Roger Goodell hates. He's the influential commissioner. And so, ESPN is they're pushing back, or at least they were under John Skipper. They were pushing back a lot harder in terms of like, look, we're still going to do these stories. The big question is the new president, Jimmy Pitaro. He's just been in for about a week and a half now. Is how much will he be pushing back on these types of stories, and how much will he be trying to rein them in? He has a background at Yahoo Sports, and so he has a background in doing news. But that's going to be the big question, because the NFL, and it's not just the NFL, the NBA, even MLS, boy, they get so upset when they see a negative story. They push back on these all the time, because they think that if you're going to be a TV partner, you're going to be a partner. Come on, you're going to try to help everything out. And the NFL in particular, they have a very hard time differentiating between ESPN, the news outlet, and ESPN, the promotional outlet that wants the NFL to do well because everybody makes money.
Well, aren't we all having a problem with all of that when the chicanery comes on in the afternoon, and the Skip Bayless part of the world where you're, I have friends that sell pre-owned cars, but you're out doing used cars from the movie 1981, the Jack Warden used cars. You're doing that in the afternoon, and then you're trying to be taken seriously. Then you're trying to be taken seriously on real issues like the knee and Jimmy V and cancer. And you really straddle the line between whether you want to be an entertainment circus, a news vehicle, a lackey and a mouthpiece for the leagues or for owners, or for or carrying the water for these Lonzo Ball sideshow maniacs. I don't know what ESPN is. It's become a little wayward, and then I start to see like top-notch talent, the Jason Starks of the world being put out and doing pay-for-play on the internet now at the Athletic, which is dude, you and I could do 2 hours on that alone, like literally where media is going. But part of this was in the old world of Roselle, and there were media partnerships. And I swear to you, John, and I got to thinking a lot about this. Back in 1996, I met a very, very beleaguered Art Modell up on the 25th floor to Signet Tower. He couldn't go back to Cleveland. Everything was in dispute. He was trying to make friends here. I was a kid that loved football. I was a loudmouth on the radio, and I had fallen in with David and Kevin Byrne, and they took me up to see Art. Art shut the door in his office. It was a getting to know you. Art wants to meet you. And the door shut. And Art said to me, and this is, when the dog's kicking him on the cover of Sports Illustrated, "Young man, never be afraid to criticize me. For Christ's sake, if all you do is praise me, they'll never believe a word you say anyway. So make sure that you're fair. If you're fair, you come in here. We're never going to have a problem, you and I. Just don't be unfair, and always call me to confirm, because I don't want any lies out on the street here. I've had enough of that in Cleveland." And, he was... And when David died last year, I wrote a very lengthy tribute, remembrance of David. And I know David, is, no one in Cleveland likes David. I get that. David Modell and Art Modell never lied to me, and I can't say that in the modern era that any owner would ever say that. Feel free to criticize me. You kind of have to criticize me at the Sports Business Journal if I'm losing money, because that's what you do, It's the business you're in, and it used to be a media partnership. Now it might as well be a sign on a dasher board and something that they feel like you owe them, not a partnership where there's any sort of level of even wink, wink, nudge, nudge anymore. That if our .com is not going to criticize us, why should the broadcast partner criticize us when we're having a rough season or having trouble selling tickets or whatever? Or our running back punched his wife in the face in an elevator that was glass in Atlantic City. I mean, the things that teams have to endure PR-wise are never pretty. But I think when you're trying to sort of hose down ESPN and Seth Wickersham and Don Van Natta, be careful what you're wishing for, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I think also, the owners today are. It's easy to criticize them, Nestor, as thin-skinned, but if you think about like the Medell generation, it was almost a hobby. This wasn't like a main business for them. Well, these franchise values are so big, and they bring in so much money today. I mean, it's all been corporatized, and so these are real businesses. So so in the past, it would be like, yeah, say whatever you want. I'm just owning a football team as a lark. Now this is a business, and so if you want to say whatever you want, and if that's going to hurt my bottom line, that's going to hurt me. That's going to really hurt me. And so there's a sort of different sensibility, I think, among the ownership today than there was certainly like 20, 30 years ago.
Well, the blackballing of Colin Kaepernick certainly isn't a good look either, and I don't know that as a long-term play it's a great look. John, I'm not telling you anything that you probably don't know already, but I can't think of a place, and if you want a story in a place, in a city that's coming down the pipe, and I couldn't believe people weren't talking about it at the Super Bowl. The Ravens have been harder hit by the knee and by the social cause issue than anywhere else. I mean, in Philadelphia, they're dancing the street, they're greasing down Crisco poles up there and having a good time, and their fan base is made up of much the same socioeconomic background, and the upper deck looks and feels the same and works in the same sorts of ways as Philadelphia. And they didn't have any problem because they won. I don't know where else it's a real problem, but this is a PSL city. It's a city where they've never really had to sell a ticket in 23 years. Some may dispute that, but I won't. They've never had to put up billboards to sell tickets like they've had to in Jacksonville since the beginning, or Tampa, or these other places where it is hot and cold, like the Orioles are hot and cold, and they're about to go cold now, which you're keenly aware of. They're letting kids in for free. But where the league is going and what they're doing, boy, in Baltimore, I am worried. I mean, I wrote a big 3-part series back at Christmas time. We had a Colts game here with playoffs at stake with 25,000 empty seats, John. This is not normal what's going on here, and the PSLs are out right now. I've got my I'm holding it up on my webcam here, but I got my PSL owner. I'm going to send my money in, and but I'm wondering who is and who isn't, and I know they're wondering, and I know they've been in damage control on the phones trying to do damage control. That's what's going on here at a local level. And then I read that the NFL and ESPN are going to war. I don't know. How does that end, John? That can't end with ESPN just saying, well, we'll be good boys and girls. We're going to fire Don and Seth, and there'll never be a bad story about ownership ever again. That's not realistic.
Now people are going to be keeping their eye on that, aren't they? Look, ESPN has the rights to Monday Night Football through 2021, and so as far as like years go, that's a long time away. I mean, so there's going to be another sort of 3 full seasons for ESPN and the NFL to kiss and make up, and the likelihood is that they will. If they don't, what the NFL has to hope is that, if ESPN goes away, then they can take that $2 billion a year that ESPN pays and get Turner to step up and pay for it, or get Fox to step up and pay for it, or maybe even have Amazon come in and float something over to them and have them pay for it. So that what the NFL, as with everything else, Nestor, comes down to dollars and cents. What the NFL wants to make sure is they want to make sure that ESPN remains happy enough and content enough that they're going to continue to stay at the table and continue to bid up the rights fees and continue to go even beyond the $2 billion. What they're in danger of doing, though, is ESPN pays an average of about $2 billion a year. That's about $1 billion more per year than everyone else. And if you take a look at the Monday Night Football schedule, it's not very good. They all of a sudden the NFL draft. The NFL is partnering with Fox. That was always a big moneymaker for ESPN.
Well, that really pissed them off, didn't it? Right?
Oh, completely did. They're thinking about taking the wild card playoff game off of ESPN and giving it to Fox.
Well, but the real give here is McDonough gets caught up in this too, and obviously Gruden went back to football, but that was a brand that ESPN spent a lot of dough building, right?
Absolutely, and now they have to start completely new, and trying to build that up all over again.
And they didn't even call me, which I don't understand, but, that's another story altogether.
You're too pro-Baltimore. They need somebody that's a little less pro-Baltimore, I think.
Well, look, John Gruden was pro-everybody and pro-everything. It was all, it became a cartoon act, right? I mean, like, literally, and that's another part of it, too. Where does the entertainment end and the seriousness begin? John Ourand is our guest here. He is a sports business journal. He's a Baltimore guy, even though he's from Washington. You can find him at Ourand, OURAND_SBJ, and the Sports Business Journal. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Friedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Carl Delmont and our friends at Friedmont Mortgage. That's FREEDMONT.com. Find them out on the web. And, of course, they're sponsoring our chat with head coach Barry Trotz. We'll be doing that on March the 29th. You baseball fans call that opening day. We'll be at Michael's Cafe in Timonium at 7:30 on opening day night, which is a Thursday, which is very, very weird. Head coach Barry Trotz will be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero and leukemia and blood patients everywhere around the world. That's going to be cool, so come on and get swabbed that night. It's also brought to you by Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind blowing through last weekend. Make sure you don't let it goof up on the roof. You need Cole Roofing. If you have a corporate commercial space, get somebody up there to take a look around. Bill explained all that to me over the weekend. You can find them at coleroofing.com. John Ourand is our guest from Sports Business Journal, and I do want to move it to the baseball side of things because, you mentioned the Orioles and your love of the team and all of that. Yeah, put the fanboy hat on, right now for me with the Yankees and the Red Sox and what's going on the field and the Machado side of this. Kids are being allowed in free. They're letting Cashner look like Dan Haggerty from the 70s and allowing him to pitch here with a beard. And it's very, very clear, and they have not made any announcement, but I've announced it for them, that the old man is no longer running the place. And, the whispers have been on the streets and all of that stuff, but that's just a fact. I mean, the old man would never let kids in for free. And only maybe to piss off all the other owners without talking to them about it, because this is kind of a landmark thing, right? I mean, the Cubs and the Cardinals don't have to let the kids in for free. The Dodgers and the Yankees don't have to let the kids in for free. This probably doesn't sit well, but on the other side of this, they've got Buck, Brock, Britton, Machado, Jones, and Duquette, who tried to leave 3 years ago, who many will dispute is even running the place, and many think Brady Anderson's running the place. Dude, it's a mess here. It might as well be 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue down here right now.
Listen, this is all I'm going to say, and my fanboy hat is on completely. I have been pessimistic going into the Orioles seasons for the past 20 years, and Buck Showalter has taken some teams that previous managers would have lost 100 games with and somehow gotten us into the wild card race. And so I trust Buck. I just think he knows how to win. He knows how to get teammates to play together. He knows how to get through the regular season. And so, any kind of optimism I have is with Buck. And I think that, you listed 4 players who legitimately could make the All-Star team. That's not a bad thing to look for. And the final thing is having gone from, 1998 to 2013 and not seeing an above 500 team, anytime we can play meaningful baseball in September, I'm okay with it. Maybe it's a factor of my age now, but I'm okay with that. I have a pretty low bar that they can jump over, and if they get to that, it'll be a fun summer.
You know what? You just took the words right out of my mouth like Meatloaf. I have a pretty low bar. I find that to be the truth here. The Ravens are held to this incredible standard here, and the Orioles, by most fans who supported 160, you have to lower your bar. And now that the Yankees and the Red Sox are coming, you're the business guy around here. What's the strategy, John? You tell me what's this going to look like a year from now? Because it's not going to look like Duquette, definitely not going to look like Machado, might not look like Adam Jones once he starts to sniff other places and opportunities and a real chance to win because he wants to win. And, then there's Buck and what he'll be doing and what Brady Anderson will be doing and how long the senior Angelo stays alive. And there's a lot of variables here, but certainly the one variable it feels to me is there's not really a long-term plan here that you can speak of and say, this is what we're thinking over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years.
No, but I think that we're at the tail end here of a long-term plan. I think what the Orioles have done last season, accepting what the Orioles have done for the past 5-6 seasons, they have one of the best records in Major League Baseball regular season wise. The Orioles got to the ALCS one of those seasons and been playoff teams a couple other seasons. So I think that we're at the tail end. Big contracts are up, and for moving forward, there's going to have to be an opportunity to sort of step back, get some younger kids in, and try to build that up again. But I think that in terms of a long-term plan, some of the better days are behind it. The hope is that this will be the final exclamation point, the best day of those better days.
Caps are finally going to win the Cup, right, John? This is the year. Come on now.
Gotta believe, man. Gotta believe.
I know you're a Caps guy, too. We got head coach Barry Trotz coming out with us 2 weeks from now. And, for the Nationals, and you're not adopting fully of them, or are you sort of supportive of the Nationals? Because the Orioles have stuck to you through your years somehow.
Yeah, the Orioles have stuck with me, but I'm one of these guys that it's like if you like the Cubs, you hate the White Sox, and if you like the Mets, you hate the Yankees. I don't mind. I kind of like the Nats. I'll tell you what. Every time Bryce Harper comes to the plate, I stop what I'm doing and I watch it. I mean, he is just has an aura about him on the field, and they have a good, fun team that should contend.
You ever think about the mass and money ever? I mean, I don't see tons about it. It sort of kind of goes away for swaths of 90 to 120 days at a time. I mean, there's going to come a point where the Angelos family is going to write a huge check to the Lerner family. I just can't believe that that's not going to happen at some point, right?
I don't know. It's in the courts now. So this is a better question for a lawyer than for me. But I think what when the Nationals moved in, Peter Angelos gave up his DC territory. That was valuable territory. And so if you go up and walk through the parking lot now at Camden Yards, back in the day, you used to see Virginia plates, DC plates. You never see those anymore. We're the only DC plate you'll ever see up there. And so he gave up that territory, and this was the deal that he cut in order to give up that territory. Well, now that the Nationals are good and they're saying, like, well, this was a bad deal, the Angelos is legitimately are looking at them saying, like, well, I know it's a bad deal. That's why we did the deal. and so it's going to be interesting to see how this comes out. I understand the Angelos point of view. I also understand the Lerner's point of view. It's like, look, we need to stay competitive and we need that money. So it's in the court of law. I don't know how it'll shape out, but I don't think it's dead certain that the Angeloses are going to pay a huge old check.
We'll continue to watch that. I know you guys do that down at Sports Business Journal as well. Tell me about Sports Business Journal just in general from an elevator speech standpoint. You guys have been at this longer and better than anybody, covering the business of what's going on behind the scenes. And, again, I love the ESPN piece. Everybody should go out and try to take a look at that, of how the ESPNs are getting pushed around by the NFL. But, this is the story of what goes on behind the scenes, and it's not pretty, right? I mean, the John Skipper story, clearly not pretty last week, as well as the Horowitz story from 6 months ago. It's, it's got as much drama, quite frankly, as covering politics, does it not?
Oh, without question. I always call Sports Business Journal, we're sort of the variety of the sports business, or the adage of the sports business. And so I'm a fan, so I care, but we could care less who wins the games or loses the games. And in fact, when we go to the games, we're generally barely watching the games because we're going and talking to various executives to get some of these stories out. And the stories now, the news cycle. Everybody talks about the news cycle in politics now. The news cycle in the sports business is crazy. Every day there seems to be a gigantic story. I mean, you mentioned, John Skipper coming out with a Q&A, and then right before that there was the NFL story, and now the Sports Illustrated is up for sale, and everything is kind of just moving at breakneck speed. and it's hard to step back and get your breath, really.
Well, that's one of the things about something like The Athletic, where I'm watching it from afar, and I worked with Ken Rosenthal, and I read Richard Deitch, and I see people going there, and God, I had Andrew Brandt on last week, and he's a part of that as well. I see where the trends are moving because I've been involved in the business, and it affects me. So I love the work you do, but you also want to see where the trends are going in media. The sports media part of this thing has changed so dramatically, and that's the part that you cover so well with ESPN, which I think the point now is all of these teams have their own media outlet, their own .com, and that has been a fundamental change, and social media, where Ray Lewis used to make himself available 15 minutes twice a week at his locker in 2003, and Tom Brady would be the greatest example of that, when back then he could do that. Now he is his own brand and 24-hour media outlet on Twitter and Instagram to market anything he wants to market, including his diet and his philosophies and his wife and various goods. And we're in a whole different world here on how sports and media blur, because they're all part of the business together.
Yeah, we were talking about leagues setting up their own channels back in 2000, 2005, the NFL Network and the NBA TV. And then eventually it became the teams doing their own websites. And so, why do they need to give you a press pass? They're able to talk directly to the fans, right? And in a certain respect, why do you even need to be at the game? You can watch it on TV and then see the post-game press conference and talk to the guy. You have cell phones for all the players, I'm sure. Talk to them afterwards. And so it went that route. And now what you're seeing is you mentioned Tom Brady, the Players Tribune. You're getting actual players deciding, well, now I can handle my own. I don't need to be part of the team network. Now I can be my own sort of media institute. And you have LeBron James going out there talking directly to millions of fans. It's pretty interesting, I think.
What's fascinating is I wrote that book on Angelos a couple years ago, and doing all the research, Albert Bell had legitimately done this. Albert Bell, when he was in Baltimore, befriended someone that had a printing press and wrote 3 or 4 columns on education and society and whatever was on his mind. And it was this big thing that he was, this was how he was going to speak in Baltimore in 1999. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, just a little ahead of the curve, right? A little ahead of, Shaquille O'Neal being the first to 1 million followers on Twitter and leaving tickets places and breadcrumbing and using it as sort of a fun toy that I think led everyone in the sports world to. I mean, Shaq is sort of the granddaddy of social media, really, kind of, sort of, right?
Oh, completely. And now they're doing videos and they're talking. They're just able to talk and interact directly with the fans in a way that they hadn't before. So in the past, they would have relied on, the beat reporter to write a nice feature about them. And, but now they don't need to rely on that beat reporter. They have that outlet. So it's incumbent upon, the beat reporters for the Washington Post or the Baltimore Sun to cover the teams differently than the beat reporters did in the 70s and 80s, when you would just sort of watch the game and recap the game. I mean, they have computer programs that can do that, for goodness sakes.
John, you bring me full circle right back to where we started, which is the ESPN NFL thing. Then, if the NFL is going to push ESPN around, what chance does Nasty Nestor have against Peter Angelos in Baltimore? Anyone who's in the press box then becomes a shill. It's built in. It's like a Putin press conference. If you never.
Well, let me ask you a question, Nestor.
Sure.
Has your coverage of the Orioles suffered by not being in the press box during games?
Has my personal coverage, my coverage of the team and knowing the players and the personalities and getting some insights into talking to players and more so executives, visiting coaches, visiting players, visiting media, all of that. It was done as an act to delegitimize me in the same way that when the orange man down at Pennsylvania Avenue, does it to Jamel. It's done to delegitimize someone who may be critical. And I was not the first one. I was just the one that stood up and was the loudest, after a decade. I mean, we're going on 13 years in 2006 when I did the walkout. I had my own business dealings with them that were beyond dodgy and horrific. I had a whole different thing. But since then, has it suffered? Sure, but I would know more about baseball and be more informed and be better. But if it's at the cost of kissing their ass and they get to edit everything I think before I think it, or come back and threaten my access for speaking the truth, especially the thing that offended me the most, John, was after all the steroid stuff and all the dirt and all the strike, and we need the fans back, and we're going to be transparent, and our players aren't going to use steroids, and I mean it was just one greasy dumpster fire after another, and to say that you would not be allowed to report. I mean, imagine Major League Baseball throwing Tom Verducci out after the Caminiti piece, right? Or Tom Boswell, who was the first one to report on the Oakland A's back in the 1980s and the Bash Brothers as maybe being tainted to some degree. That, if that's the way that leagues are going to behave, there's no hope for anyone. I said that in 06. Once Angelos threw a guy like me out, then everybody else has to get in line or they're next. And that's kind of how it works when Putin gasses guys in the UK. It's like once one of you is thrown out, then you're all going to play ball, right? Right. And that's unacceptable to me, and I think that's why I called you, because this ESPN thing really speaks to the heart of that. Really, it does, and I think that's dangerous, bro, especially given who's running the country right now and what he would like to do to the media here.
Well, I can guarantee you this. ESPN has a news organization with true blue journalists on there. Journalists I respect that a lot.
No doubt.
And I would bet you that even with the new president in, even with the NFL saber rattling with them, the best. ESPN's going to stick up for the reporters, and you're going to still see tough, hard reports. I mean, take a look at Seth Wickersham got killed. When was it? In December, because he wrote about the palace intrigue at the Patriots. Well, now here we are in March, and it turns out his reporting was actually true. Like we're now seeing more reports sort of seep out about it, But
when I read it, I said, "Of course it's true because Seth wrote it," and that's where we are in the new world, right? Like we either trust or we don't, based on history and based on facts. And some of us still discern those. Some of us don't well at all. Some of us don't know a Russian bot from an Iowa farmer, and it's sad for all of us. But that's part of where we are with sports journalism too, where the barstool sports are out there and encouraged along, and that's also one of the reasons why the teams do fight back and why players and coaches, everyone wants it. I mean, look, the Ravens are the most paranoid organization that I've dealt with outside of the Orioles, which weren't paranoid. It was more, Stalin-esque than just paranoid. But paranoia, that's what leads the Patriots, right? It's part of their mystique that you think when you come in as the Jaguars, as a visiting team, they might be, miking your locker room. I mean, like a haunted house, right? Like that paranoia has served the Patriots really well. So is the cheating, by the way, because all the trophies still sit there. Right?
Yeah. Well, in college, you have to vacate wins, I guess.
Oh,
I
such
still
a
don't know
penalty.
what that means.
Such a terrible price to pay. But it is a little dangerous, don't you agree? I mean, I think at the end of this, the flag that goes up for me is they're trying to push ESPN around. Imagine what they're going to do to the Detroit Free Press or to Sports Illustrated or whomever else is out there when it comes to access and what you can and can't say about our league, especially with CTE. every day that becomes an issue. You know what I mean? Every day, players' health moving forward as these players age, my age, and start to struggle. These are going to be stories that people like you and I have to tell, right? Literally.
Listen, you're seeing it down here in D.C., where the Washington Post used to have a ton of people on press row, and now, the ownership at the Redskins have, culled that. It's a fraction of what it used to be. It's so much so that, I'd heard that the Post, started buying tickets, for their reporters to kind of get in to document the game and watch the game and see what was going on at the games. So it's something that's always kind of happened. I think the difficulty with you is that you're independent, so it's sort of you have little leverage. There's not a big Baltimore Sun.
But we're all independent, though, to some degree. I mean, you know what I mean?
To some degree, but I'll tell you, the Washington Post would stick up for its reporters. ESPN is going to stick up for its reporters. Sports Illustrated is going to stick up for its reporters. If I'm going in sort of as a freelancer or somebody as one, there's nobody sort of. And this is rough too, because I think more reporters should be sticking up for somebody that's getting blackballed.
Well, look at Colin Kaepernick. You don't have to look any further than that to say who was sticking up for him. I don't know. No one. I remember reading about Curt Flood and thinking, Daddy, how did that happen? And we're right in the middle of it. So when I hear that ESPN's getting pushed around, that should let everybody know they're fair game, that they're coming for you next, kind of, sort of. And I think that's. And look, I remember when the team websites began. Peter King wrote a big piece 10 years ago. Will this be the beginning of getting shoved out? Well, I experienced that in Indianapolis, where Coach Harbaugh did an exclusive with the website, while me and the Baltimore Sun, the only reporters that actually went there to cover it, are sitting on the outside. And the owners held a press conference at 1:30 on the Friday before the Super Bowl. But then again, they have to sell their season tickets. You know what I mean? So that's part of every team's give and take with the media, with their fan base, with their box holders, with their suite holders, with their partnerships, with their TV and radio rights holders, and more than that, with their partners with each other, right? So when the Orioles just decide unilaterally we're letting kids in for free, that may or may not go over well with the Brewers ownership or the Rangers ownership, or they may say, hell, that's a good idea, because I know everybody wasn't real happy about the Falcons having dollar hot dogs, right?
Until they realize how much money the Falcons made off the dollar hot dogs. I mean, I would bet you, I love this idea of letting kids in for free. I think it's a smart, forward-looking idea. One of the biggest complaints about baseball is how it's getting grayer, how its average age is getting bigger. It's like when you and I grew up, going to those games in Memorial Stadium, that was fun. I'll never forget running up the tunnel to just see the grass in the outfield. It was great. And so,
that's an awesome memory you just gave me there, John. Thank you very much.
What's that?
That's an awesome memory. Thank you very much. I pictured it. I remember you went up the ramp, and there was the grass, and there was the outfield. It was the greatest place on earth, right?
You would have it. I mean, I loved Memorial Stadium, but it was like these ugly concrete, and it was dark and dingy, and I would just run up. I'd see the sunshine out, and I'd
smell of stale beer and peanut musty. Remember that? Yeah.
Those accents I couldn't understand from Dundalk. What the hell, man?
What? I don't know what you're talking about, John. How's that? Is that pretty good? I could do a whole segment in my Dundalkese, man. Don't tempt me. I'll do the whole read break on the end of this in my Dundalk accent. It'll be great.
Perfect.
John, I appreciate you, man. It's always great to visit with you. I'm sorry I keep you too long, but we get into these fun conversations. Tell everybody why you love the Orioles and how they're going to win 98 games this year, or are they not? Are you that positive or no?
Not 98. I just have us at 91. And we're going to sneak in. We're going to win the wild card playoff game, and then we're going to shock the world.
Oh, man. I'm going to need you in July and August and September to come in and keep the mood light around here. But I'm sure we'll have some media thing to bitch about. Hey, by the way, the AllStar Game coulda, shoulda, woulda been in Baltimore. So the cost of Angelos being a jerk, I can at least document that Angelos being a jerk has cost us an AllStar Game in Baltimore. Will you at least admit that, John?
Well, it's a Baltimore-Washington corridor. I mean, this should be kind of a Baltimore All-Star Game this summer, right?
It should be, shouldn't it? Yeah, but it's not. So my wife and I are getting in the car. We're coming down to Nats Park. I've been promising my wife, of all the cool things we've done on Earth, she wants to go to an All-Star baseball game. When she was sick and fighting for her life a couple years ago, she says, I want to do an All-Star game when I get better. And I've kind of promised her San Diego and didn't take her. We were going to do Cincinnati. Now that it's in Washington, dude, I got no excuse, right? Like, I can get in the car and go. So
yeah,
we're going to the All-Star game.
It's worth seeing at least once, and at least for the first couple of innings.
DC's going to do like a big hoot, and it's going to be fun to be down there, I think, right, for a couple days.
Can I tell you one thing? DC has turned into a baseball town, and the Nats are they're more popular than I ever thought they would be.
Does that mean everybody's white in 58?
I started getting ticket requests, Nestor, like last year. Like people were like, "Oh, the All-Stars game is coming. Can you get?" And I'm like, "No, I can't. I got to get a press pass for myself." But it's going to be DC, especially after last year when it was in Miami and nobody cared. DC is really going to it's going to be pretty cool.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you down there. I usually see you where press boxes lie or where Super Bowls are. Always great to follow you, man. Always appreciate your insights, and thanks for coming on, John.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
And I have learned how to pronounce his last name, John Ourand. There it is, OURAND_SBJ. He's out at Sports Business Journal. March Madness. Orioles getting ready to play. We got head coach Barry Trotz joining us. We're swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry. And for There Goes My Hero at Michael's Cafe in Timonium on York Road. You know where it is. Stop by, get a crab cake, get a little split-level soup. Say hello to the coach after opening day. It is the 29th of March at 7:30. So stop by on your way home if you are heading north, or just come by and say hello to head coach Barry Trotz and all of our friends that evening. The buyatoyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day for you on your mobile device. You can download the TuneIn Radio app, listen anywhere, including down where John Ourand lives, down in D.C. and Virginia. You're coming from south of the border, as I'd like to say. You can still listen to WNST out online. My thanks to buyatoyota.com and our audio vault. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.